So often we think that physical attraction begins with touch, with appearance, with the curve of a smile or the movement of a body, but that's not where true sexual connection is born. The truth is, it begins long before that, long before skin meets skin or eyes meet eyes. It starts with the mind, in the silent conversations we have with ourselves, in the memories we hold, in the psychological threads that tie one person's desire to another's presence. When you begin to understand this, you stop chasing moments and start cultivating an atmosphere. You realize that turning a man on isn't about what you wear or how you look. It's about how you make him feel, not just physically, but emotionally, intellectually, and energetically. The deepest form of attraction isn't rooted in fantasy, but in familiarity with a twist of mystery. It's the combination of feeling seen and feeling intrigued, feeling safe but still excited. When you become fluent in the language of emotional stimulation, you step into a power that doesn't fade with time or change with fashion. You start to notice the little details about what lights him up, the way he talks about his passions, the moments when his eyes glow with conviction, the pauses he takes when he's trying to explain something that really matters to him. That's the space where connection begins. And when you understand how a man feels most alive, you begin to understand how to become woven into that aliveness. He begins to associate his desire with your presence, not just with your body, but with your energy, your insight, your timing, your ability to respond with sincerity and depth. His attraction turns into something rooted, something he doesn't even fully understand but can't let go of either. You don't need to manipulate that energy or force it to grow. You nurture it. You stay curious. You reflect his thoughts back to him in a way that shows you're really listening, not just to his words, but to what's underneath them. You become the person who gets what he's saying without him having to over-explain. That makes you rare. And in a world full of people who try to impress, being someone who understands becomes magnetic. That understanding becomes addictive. It builds trust. And trust is the foundation of every strong desire. Because when a man feels safe, when he feels admired and respected in your presence, he begins to open up in ways he never expected. He becomes vulnerable. And with vulnerability comes intensity. The kind of intensity that burns slow but steady, that doesn't fade with time but deepens instead. When desire is built on emotional anticipation rather than constant availability, it becomes harder to forget. It lingers. It echoes in the spaces between messages, in the tone of a voice that replays in his head when you're not around. That's what psychological attraction does. It turns distance into fuel, silence into tension, and memory into craving. It makes him associate pleasure with your presence, not because of the physical moments, but because of what he felt in those moments. That feeling becomes the addiction. It's why some people linger in our minds longer than others, not because they were the most attractive, but because they made us feel something we weren't ready to stop feeling. And when you understand what emotion he connects with excitement, with warmth, with intimacy, then you begin to build a pattern in his heart and mind that ties those experiences to you. The truth is, most people are starving for something deeper. They just don't always know how to ask for it. They might chase superficial thrills, but their soul craves something more. If you can become the person who feeds that craving, not just for attention, but for connection, for recognition, for meaning, then you're not just someone he wants. You become someone he needs, not in a dependent way, but in a way that nourishes his spirit. That's when physical touch stops being physical and starts being emotional. That's when intimacy stops being about performance and starts becoming presence. That's when he starts associating your presence with peace, excitement, belonging, and alignment all at once. Attraction of the body is fleeting, but attraction of the mind is enduring. It weaves itself into memory. It shapes how someone sees the world after they've met you. When you're thoughtful, when you're intentional, when you learn to speak to the emotional reality of someone's life, you go from being a moment to becoming a movement in their heart. You no longer need to compete for attention because the bond you're building is stronger than appearance, louder than words, and more impactful than effort. That bond begins with psychological understanding. That's how desire moves from temporary interest to lasting connection, by anchoring it not in chemistry alone, but in the unspoken conversation between your presence and his inner world. Confidence is not a loud voice in a crowded room or a bold strut that draws all eyes. It's a quiet, unshakable presence that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. It radiates from within and speaks to something deeper than physical attraction. True sexual magnetism starts when you carry yourself like you know you're enough, without needing to prove it or perform it. It's in how you walk, how you breathe, how you listen, how you take up space with calm certainty instead of needing attention to feel valuable. When a man senses that you are content within yourself, that you are not seeking approval or chasing validation, he begins to see you as something rare. That rarity is what draws him in, not just because you are attractive, but because you are grounded in who you are. And that grounding becomes addictive. When a woman loves her own body, not because it's flawless, but because it's hers, she becomes irresistible in a way that can't be duplicated. It's not about the clothes she wears or how she does her hair. It's about the energy she brings into every room she enters. A man becomes sexually drawn, not to perfection, but to the freedom she walks in, the lack of apology she carries when she laughs too loudly or takes her time. That freedom becomes the fantasy, because it's so uncommon in a world filled with insecurity disguised as pride. When you stop performing for the male gaze and start owning your own, something changes. You start commanding attention by not demanding it. And it's in that nonchalance, in that graceful detachment, that a man begins to crave your presence in a way that's hard to explain. Confidence is not pretending you're better than others. It's refusing to compare yourself at all. It's knowing that your uniqueness isn't a weakness, but your greatest asset. When you embrace your quirks, your flaws, your voice, your story, when you bring all of yourself into every interaction, you create a space where authenticity can thrive. That space becomes a safe zone, a place where a man can lower his guard, where he doesn't feel judged or measured. And when he feels accepted, he begins to associate that acceptance with intimacy. That's when he starts linking desire to your presence, not because you're trying to impress him, but because you're letting him in without needing him to fill your gaps. That kind of confidence doesn't just turn heads, it changes hearts. There's a difference between being noticed and being remembered. Confidence ensures you're both. It makes your presence linger long after you've left the room. When you're rooted in self-respect, you create boundaries effortlessly. You don't chase or beg or try to convince someone of your worth. You simply show up fully, speak honestly, and let your energy speak for itself. And when a man encounters that, it disrupts his usual rhythm. He begins to question the superficial connections he's used to, and your presence becomes a mirror that reflects something deeper back to him. That depth starts to stir something primal, an urge not just to touch, but to understand, to protect, to connect on a level that outlasts chemistry. Men are drawn to women who are comfortable in their own skin, not because of what they look like, but because of how they carry what they look like. That confidence in movement, that calm in chaos, that certainty in silence. These are the things that make you unforgettable. It's not about needing to be the best, the most beautiful, or the most desired. It's about knowing that you already are without having to prove it. That self-assurance becomes a gravitational force. It pulls him closer not through neediness, but through power. And when he realizes that your desire for him comes from choice, not from lack, it changes everything. Desire becomes meaningful. Attention becomes a gift, not a request. You stop becoming someone who is chasing love and start becoming someone who invites it, not with words or gestures or seduction, but with presence. Your energy starts doing the work for you, the way you hold your gaze, the way you respond with stillness instead of overreaction, the way you express yourself with clarity instead of confusion. All of this signals to a man that you're whole, and wholeness is rare. It's why people get addicted to it. Because we all want to be around someone who doesn't need us to feel valuable but still chooses us with intention. That choice, when it's rooted in confidence, becomes irresistible. It becomes the source of the attraction that lingers in the back of his mind, even in moments of silence or distance. There is something profoundly powerful about emotional intimacy, a force that moves beyond the skin and seeps deep into the soul, creating an invisible thread between two people that physical closeness alone can never replicate. When a man feels emotionally safe with you, when he senses that he can share parts of himself that remain hidden from the rest of the world, the way he connects to you begins to shift. He no longer sees you as someone temporary or surface level. He begins to crave you in a way that transcends the physical. This is where true sexual addiction begins, not with desire for the body, but with longing for the experience you bring into his inner world. When he feels seen without judgment, heard without interruption, and valued without condition, his heart opens in a way that creates deeper physical desire. That desire no longer comes from impulse, but from bond, from the hunger to merge completely with someone who meets him beyond the surface. So many people engage in physical intimacy hoping it will lead to emotional closeness, but the opposite is what creates lasting intensity. When the emotional connection comes first, the physical experience becomes richer, more meaningful, more memorable. A man will become deeply hooked on someone who touches not only his body, but his mind, his spirit, his past, and his future, all at once. That emotional intimacy begins in the small, everyday moments. The way you ask how he's really feeling and wait for the answer. The way you notice the shift in his voice even when he says he's fine. The way you remember the details that matter to him. These seemingly ordinary actions become extraordinary in a world where most people feel unseen. And the moment he feels fully recognized, a desire begins to grow, not just to be with you, but to stay close, to return, to keep the connection alive at all costs. Emotional intimacy isn't about constant seriousness or deep conversations every hour of the day. It's about being attuned, being responsive, being present. It's in the shared laughter that follows vulnerability, in the gentle teasing that never crosses into disrespect, in the silent looks that say more than words ever could. These are the experiences that create a foundation of trust. And from that trust comes freedom, the freedom to explore each other fully, physically and emotionally, without fear of judgment or rejection. When a man feels this freedom with you, he starts associating you with peace, with comfort, with pleasure wrapped in meaning. His body remembers that feeling even when you're not around, and he begins to crave your energy, your essence, the experience of being understood on a level he didn't think was possible. Attraction deepens when emotions are engaged, when the connection is not just felt but trusted, when you provide a space where he doesn't have to perform, doesn't have to hide, doesn't have to filter who he is, then the bond that grows becomes one of safety and desire combined. That blend is rare. That blend is magnetic. It transforms ordinary moments into memories, casual interactions into cravings, and simple touches into something he replays over and over again. The addiction doesn't come from how often you're together, but from how deeply he feels when he is with you. He becomes addicted not to your presence alone, but to the way his own soul expands in your presence. He sees himself more clearly through your eyes, and in that reflection, he finds something worth returning to. When you listen with genuine interest, when you hold space without trying to fix or control, when you encourage growth without pushing your own agenda, you create a dynamic that's emotionally nourishing. Emotional nourishment is addictive because it's so rare. Most people offer distraction, validation, or excitement, but emotional nourishment offers something deeper. It allows someone to feel like they are home. And in that sense of home, intimacy flourishes. The physical expression of that intimacy becomes something sacred, something he wants to protect and prioritize. He doesn't just want you in the bedroom, he wants you in his life, in his plans, in his future. His desire turns into devotion. His longing becomes consistent, not because you're giving him everything, but because you're giving him something that feels like it can't be found elsewhere. Physical chemistry without emotional depth fades quickly. It satisfies a moment, not a memory. But when emotional intimacy is the root, the physical becomes a reflection of something deeper, something unspoken. The way he touches you changes. The way he looks at you lingers. The way he reaches for you in quiet moments becomes softer, more intentional, more intense. That intensity builds over time, fueled by emotional presence and honesty. It is in that honesty, that vulnerability, that shared experience of feeling emotionally naked with one another that real addiction is formed. Not addiction born from need or lack, but addiction built on alignment, resonance, connection. When that emotional rhythm flows between you and him, it becomes something he doesn't want to lose, something he thinks about even when he's far away. There is a unique kind of power in the unknown, in the spaces you leave open, in the questions that don't get answered right away. When you allow mystery to breathe in a connection, it creates a sense of anticipation that draws someone in over and over again. A man becomes more addicted to what he can't predict, to the rhythm he can't quite control, to the space where he's intrigued but not overwhelmed. This isn't about manipulation, it's about energy. It's about recognizing that overexposure dulls excitement and that space gives tension the room to grow. Desire thrives when it has something to reach for, when it has room to expand, when it has time to build. When you give someone everything too quickly, you skip the dance, and the dance is what makes the experience unforgettable. The chase isn't just about pursuit, it's about emotional investment. When a man has to lean in, ask questions, reflect on his own feelings, and wonder about your thoughts, he becomes engaged. And engagement is the soil where desire grows. When you're not always available, when your energy is consistent but not constant, you allow his curiosity to develop. He starts to notice the way you move through the world, the way you choose your words, the way you share parts of yourself slowly, intentionally. And in that slow unfolding, you become more than a fantasy, you become a story. He becomes addicted not just to your body, but to the journey of discovering who you are piece by piece. That journey holds emotional weight, and that emotional weight gives physical connection more meaning. Mystery is not about hiding, it's about choosing what to reveal and when. It's about letting someone earn layers of you through consistency, patience, and care. When a man feels like every moment with you gives him something new to understand, to feel, to reflect on, he becomes emotionally invested in a way that makes him crave more. That craving is different from lust. It doesn't burn out, it deepens. It grows in silence, in space, in time. The most memorable connections aren't rushed. They unfold in pauses, in glances, in the way energy shifts between two people without a single word. When you hold that energy with grace, when you let him lean in instead of pushing forward, you create a rhythm that becomes addictive on a level he doesn't even fully understand. Desire lives in delayed gratification. It thrives in the space between want and receive, in the gap between imagination and reality. When you create space for his mind to wander, for his thoughts to loop back to you, for his emotions to build in your absence, you create a psychological imprint. He begins to associate the tension, the anticipation, the longing with your presence. That imprint deepens each time you return, each time you show up again with something new, something genuine, something real. You're not withholding, you're allowing him to meet your depth step by step, allowing his emotions to catch up to his instincts, allowing desire to grow through time, not just through touch. That permission creates a container where his curiosity, his respect, and his attraction can grow all at once. There's something deeply magnetic about a woman who doesn't need to explain everything she feels, who allows silence to exist without panic, who lets mystery exist without guilt. She's not trying to be distant. She simply knows that not everything needs to be spoken to be felt. That presence becomes unforgettable. A man doesn't just remember what she said, he remembers how it felt to be near her, how his heart sped up when she leaned closer, how his thoughts raced when she smiled and looked away. He becomes addicted to that emotional friction, that subtle unpredictability, that sacred space between familiarity and novelty. It's not confusion, it's chemistry cultivated through intention, through trust, through allowing both of you to remain your own people within the connection. The most powerful kind of desire is the one that grows in your absence. When you're not around but still on his mind, when a scent, a sound, or a song reminds him of you, when he finds himself replaying conversations and wondering what you meant. That's when the addiction forms. It forms not through proximity, but through emotional residue, through the trace you leave behind. When you don't rush to fill every space, when you're not constantly explaining or offering yourself too quickly, you allow him the gift of reflection. And in that reflection, his longing expands. He begins to crave the next moment with you, not because you gave him everything last time, but because you left space for more. That space becomes a magnet. That magnetism creates a pull he doesn't want to escape. You're not just creating mystery for his sake. You're honoring your own pace, your own boundaries, your own worth. When you allow things to unfold without force, when you stay rooted in your own energy rather than constantly adapting to his, you send a clear message. Your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. And that message shifts the entire dynamic. He stops taking your attention for granted. He stops assuming access. He starts noticing the details, starts appreciating your time, starts valuing every part of the connection that grows slowly, genuinely, naturally. And it's in that natural unfolding, that intentional space, that you become unforgettable, not because you tried to be, but because the experience of you can't be replicated. It's inimitable, it's rare, and it lingers long after the moment ends. Attraction is not just physical, it's an energy, a presence, a language that speaks through the body without needing words. Every glance, every pause, every gesture carries meaning when it's delivered with intention. When you learn how to master the energy you bring into a room, into a conversation, into a touch, you begin to speak in ways that bypass the logical mind and go straight into feeling. A man becomes addicted to the unspoken when it is carefully felt, when your touch is mindful, when your eyes hold emotion, when your movement mirrors depth, the way you lean in just slightly, the way your fingers trail for a second longer than necessary, the way your tone softens when you speak to what matters. All of it builds emotional tension. That tension becomes something he starts to crave without understanding why. It's not about physicality alone, it's about the presence behind it, the feeling of being fully engaged in the moment with someone who isn't performing but simply being. When two people connect energetically, the space between them becomes alive. You can feel it in the stillness, in the pauses, in the way silence holds meaning. When your energy is grounded, when you're not rushing or overthinking or proving, you create an environment where he can breathe more deeply, feel more intensely, respond more freely. Your calm becomes a sanctuary. Your presence becomes a safe space. And in that space, desire grows. It's the difference between contact and connection. When you are connected to your own energy, when you are aware of what you feel and how you show up, you become magnetic. That magnetism doesn't shout, it whispers, it doesn't demand, it invites. And that invitation becomes irresistible because it doesn't chase, it attracts. A man becomes drawn not just to your body, but to the way you make him feel in your presence. If your energy feels like freedom, like softness, like understanding, then physical desire becomes more than a moment, it becomes an experience. He begins to anticipate your energy, not just your body. He remembers the way the room felt when you entered, the way his shoulders relaxed when you looked at him, the way the energy between you shifted even when no words were exchanged. This is the essence of attraction that endures. It's rooted in presence, in the subtle nuances of how you show up. It's not just about being sexy, it's about being connected to yourself in a way that invites him to connect more deeply with you. Everything about you begins to communicate without effort when you understand how to use energy with intention. The way you touch doesn't need to be bold to be powerful. The light brush of your fingers against his arm, the way you linger just slightly during a hug, the warmth in your voice when you say his name, all of these moments carry energy. And when they're done with awareness, they leave a lasting impression. He starts to feel addicted not to what you do, but to how it makes him feel. The pleasure comes not from technique, but from the authenticity behind it. And that authenticity becomes rare, especially in a world where many interactions feel rushed, forced, or shallow. When you become attuned to his responses, when you listen with more than your ears, when you notice the slight changes in his breath or posture, you become someone who understands him without explanation. That understanding becomes a form of intimacy, and intimacy makes physical desire more powerful. It's not just about excitement, it's about recognition. It's about feeling understood without words, desired without demand, safe without confinement. You become someone he doesn't just want to touch, but someone he wants to be near, someone whose energy he starts to miss even before you've left. That absence becomes its own form of presence. That craving becomes rooted in emotional memory. The most seductive moments are often the quietest. The way you look at him after a joke, the way you exhale when you're relaxed around him, the way you reach for his hand without saying anything. These moments are filled with intention. They're not about performance, they're about being fully in the experience. And when you are fully in the experience, your energy deepens. It moves from surface to soul. And when he feels that, he doesn't just want more of your body. He wants more of your presence. He wants more of the way your energy makes his feel, more of the way his mind slows down when he's near you, more of the way you create a space where he can be both strong and soft, both confident and vulnerable. Energy doesn't lie. You can't fake what you feel, and you can't force what isn't real. But when you show up with truth in your energy, with softness in your intention, with clarity in your presence, you speak to something inside of him that words can't reach. And that something becomes the root of his attraction. It becomes the reason he keeps thinking about you after the conversation ends. The reason your touch lingers longer in his memory. The reason your absence feels louder than other people's presence. You become a memory he wants to relive, an energy he wants to feel again, a presence that reminds him of something deeper than physical desire.